Hey, this is Dave with the Shepherd School, and today we're going to mess around with the Glock. We're going to mess with the trigger pull weight. And when you're messing with one, there's three things that work together to give you what the actual trigger pull is. And that would be the connector, the firing pin spring, and the trigger spring. Now, I personally do not mess with reduced power firing pin springs. I know some people say that it increases lockup and all sorts of stuff. But I don't like messing with it because if you have hard primers, so military surplus or a lot of duty ammo, those hard primers, they may not fire. And so when you mess with reduced power firing pin springs, then you are causing or could cause malfunctions, failures to fire. And since my gun is for defensive use, I don't want that to happen. Also, Glock doesn't have factory available reduced firing pin springs. They don't want them. It messes up the design. So that leaves us with trigger springs and connectors. Now I have in my hand a 3.5 pound connector. Now Glock hates that term. They want you to call it a 4.5 pound connector because that's probably a little more accurate to what the weight is if you don't do anything else. But 3.5 pound has stuck. Now let me tell you something about this. Glock will not sell you, even Glock Armors will not sell you a 3.5 pound connector without a letter. You have to be law enforcement. You have to have a letter from your chief law enforcement officer. So if you're a deputy or sheriff, if you're a police officer, your chief, telling Glock that they allow you to carry this in your gun. Okay? So there's aftermarket parts that you can get, like say from Ghost or wherever. All right? But I would prefer to use an OEM part as much as I could. All right? Now, the problem with this is if I just replace the stock connector with this connector, right, it's going to take, let's just say a stock Glock has a trigger break at 5.25 pounds. All right, this is going to bring it down to about 4 pounds, which is awful light for a defensive gun. All right, but we can change around some other parts to bring this up to a more standard configuration. This is the dreaded New York trigger spring, the olive trigger spring. You see that it's a little different in configuration than the S trigger spring. On a regular Glock, right? Now, this is what stock spring is. Here's the New York spring, okay? One of the good things about a New York spring is it's almost impossible to break, right? Even though it is plastic, the design of it makes it a lot heavier duty than the regular S spring, all right? Now, if I just change and don't change anything else, I take out the S spring and replace it with this, it takes the stock 5.25 pound trigger pull and takes it up to about 7.5 or higher, That's a lot, right? Gives you a lot harder trigger pull. Maybe that is one of the reasons why the other day the cop shot the 9 innocent bystanders, right? Hard trigger pull kind of messes with accuracy. But it's a lot more defensible as to accidental shootings, right? At least from a law enforcement supervisor perspective, right? Now, what would happen if we reduce the trigger pull with this and increase the trigger pull with this, right? If I put in the 3.5 pound connector and I put in the New York trigger spring, it's going to make the trigger pull somewhere around 6 pounds. It's going to do a little more than that because it's a little higher trigger pull than what you get stock, but it's a lot more positive. Basically, it makes it a lot more like a double action pistol, right? Or a double action revolver, right? So we're going to try this and put it in the gun and see what happens, all right? So here's my spring. It's got a little hook down here. If you look at the bottom, there's a little hole. Take that hook and just drop it down. I don't know if you heard it snap, but it snaps in, right? Just like that, okay? That's what it should look like. And the connector, just take my little screwdriver. The connector just lifts right up. Pushes right back down. Okay. New connector. New spring. Take my trigger. Hook it in. Okay. Drop it all back in the gun. Let me go ahead and assemble this. Alright, so there's my Glock. I've changed the trigger connector and I put in a New York spring. It's a lot firmer take up. It's still got the trigger reset. There is a noticeable change in the feel of the trigger. Gives you a lot more, to me, I feel it a lot more in the first stage of the two stages. You know, that's a lot more deliberate, but the actual trigger release portion is a little bit lighter, noticeably different. Okay, what I'm going to do is take that out to the range and shoot it a lot to see if I like it. But there you go. That's what it was. It wasn't that hard, and we'll see how I think about it after I fired a couple thousand rounds through it. All right. So until next time, you can always catch online. www.tmgun.com.